Sagittarius, a rumor about you is on everyone's lips. Sagittarius, may I ask you something? Have you ever walked into a room and clearly felt eyes watching you, even though everything seemed perfectly silent? As if your name had just been spoken, but someone quickly swallowed it back down? Have you ever sensed the air suddenly shift, as if someone had just mentioned your name, but no one would admit it? That's not your imagination. That's energy. That's vibrational frequency. And right now, whether you realize it or not, something is truly happening. Your name is on everyone's lips. You weren't seeking attention. You weren't showing off. You've just been living truthfully, healing, growing, rising. But when someone rises the way you have, the world takes notice, even if they pretend not to. Especially when they pretend not to. Let me be honest with you. This isn't just a tarot reading. This isn't a handful of comforting words to pass the day. This is a divine appointment. Something greater than you and me has arranged this exact moment. You were meant to hear this message. Right now. Not earlier. Not later. But today. Because something is shifting in your life. Something too powerful to be hidden. Too real to be denied. And too sacred to be described with ordinary words. Take a breath with me, right here, right now. Because what we are about to open together, it's not just a story. It's a mirror. A gateway. And once you step through, you will not be the same. You've felt it, haven't you? That strange shift in the air? The way people have begun to look at you, speak to you? The sudden curiosity from those who once treated you like you were invisible? You're not imagining it. This is the universe bringing you into a time of revelation. You are no longer hidden. And when light returns after a long night, darkness begins to whisper. But here's something not many people will tell you. Not every whisper carries pain. Some whispers are signals. Evidence that you are making an impact. Proof that your vibrational frequency is now impossible to ignore. Sagittarius. You were born under the sign of expansion. Of truth. Of courage. And no matter how many times you've been hurt, no matter how many times life has tried to tell you to shrink down, quiet down, be easier, you were never created to be confined. You were never born to blend in. And now, the rumors are everywhere. The voices are growing louder. But don't get it twisted, this isn't drama. What's happening says nothing about them. It says everything about you. About how your very presence is awakening something in others. Something they can't name. But that shakes the false foundations they've built their lives upon. They don't talk about you because they hate you. They talk because they can no longer ignore you. And perhaps, deep in your soul, you feel it too. That something is breaking open inside. That a part of you is bursting forth. Shifting. Blooming. Like a flower that's been buried underground for years. And is finally ready to reach for the sun. You see? Rumors don't just follow fame. They follow frequency. And you, dear Sagittarius. You are vibrating on a level higher than ever before. You've done the inner work. You've prayed in silence. You've healed in the dark. And now, the universe is responding. With public light. This message, this very moment, is a sacred unveiling. In the next 30 minutes, I will take you deep. Together, we'll explore the energy swirling around you. We'll uncover the whispers. and the people who pretend to support you while secretly envying you. But above all, we will remember together who you were before the world ever knew your name. So if something within your soul is stirring as you hear this, don't brush it off. Speak it out loud if you're ready. I am ready to rise above the rumors. Not just as a comment, but as a covenant. With your own path of rising. Because every declaration spoken in truth becomes a seed for transformation. And if these words are touching something in you, I invite you to like and share this video. Not for me, but for someone, somewhere, who is also being whispered about. They need to know they're not alone. Because this isn't just about surviving the rumors. It's about remembering why people started talking about you in the first place. Now then, let's begin. There's one thing I believe with certainty, and it's this. Real light never needs to introduce itself. It just needs to show up. And attention will find it. Sagittarius is exactly that. You don't need to try to draw anyone in. Your presence. Your essence. Who you are. It's enough to make people take notice. But you also know what comes with attention. Don't you? The whispers. The glances. The incomplete stories told over and over again. As if someone actually holds the truth. And suddenly, you become the headline in someone else's story. Without ever stepping outside of who you are. I've lived long enough to know this. When someone starts talking about you, it's not always because they dislike you. Sometimes, it's because they can't help but notice you. Because you're doing what they haven't dared to do. Because you're living a life they've never given themselves permission to live. You are a living reminder that freedom is real. That truth can be spoken. And that boldness isn't a flaw. It's a strength. But not everyone is ready to face that. So they whisper. They talk. They distort. But in the end, they're just painting a picture of the very things they're not ready to confront within themselves. Here's my take on it. People only gossip about what holds value. No one spreads rumors about a stone on the side of the road. They whisper when standing in front of a gem. Too bright for them to approach. And you, Sagittarius? You're not the kind of soul meant to live quietly. You came into this world to stir the waters. To open doors. For yourself. And for others. You are a spiritual adventurer. A warrior of truth. The one who goes ahead to prove that living honestly. Speaking boldly. Loving fully. Is still possible. I remember a Sagittarius woman once told me. I never meant to make anyone uncomfortable. I just don't know how to pretend. And I laughed out loud. Because that is exactly what Sagittarius is. Unpolished. Unfiltered. Unapologetically real. And it is precisely that. That tends to make people the most uncomfortable. So what's the lesson here? It's simple. You don't have to dim your light just to avoid blinding others. Your radiance is not the problem. It's an invitation. For those ready to step out of their own shadows. And if you're hearing this, and there's a familiar ache in your heart, like you've been misunderstood, talked about, looked at unfairly, simply because you chose to live honestly, then I invite you to send a message back to the universe. Type into the comments. I choose to keep living truthfully, no matter what others say. It's not just a statement. It's a form of spiritual protection. Against the invisible storms you never asked to carry. Because this world doesn't need more people pretending to be kind. It needs more people like you. The ones who dare to be real. The ones who endure. The ones who keep walking. Even when whispers follow them. People talk a lot about success. But they rarely talk about the price of honesty. And you, a Sagittarius. You are paying that price with steadiness. With faith in your own light. With your refusal to compromise with darkness. So if the rumors are spreading, you don't need to run. You don't need to react. Just keep walking. Because light never needs to look back. And I want you to hold this truth in your heart. You don't need an apology from those who misunderstood you. What you need is to keep living in such a way that they'll feel ashamed. They didn't believe in your light sooner. But the story doesn't end here. Because behind the admiring looks and quiet whispers, sometimes lies an eye that hides envy. Someone is watching you. Not to celebrate you, but to compare. To control. To try and pull you back into who you used to be. We'll talk about that right after this. There's something I've come to realize. After decades of observing the zodiac signs, Sagittarius never just shows up. They always accidentally activate something in others. Sometimes it's inspiration. Sometimes admiration. But other times, it's a quiet kind of discomfort. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because they're real. And not everyone is ready to face the real in someone unafraid to be themselves. I believe there are two kinds of light in life. The kind that warms. And the kind that exposes. You, Sagittarius, are the second kind. When you enter a room, you don't need to speak. Your presence alone is enough to uncover what others have worked hard to hide. They start to compare. They feel small. They're confused by the freedom you wear so naturally. And instead of asking themselves why they feel that way, they choose the easier path. They speak against you. Blur your image. Attach false labels to who you are. I've seen this many times in spiritual sessions. Some people don't come to light to learn from it. They come to try to control it. They don't hate you. They hate the way you remind them. They haven't yet had the courage to live honestly. And that's why you become the name they mention. Not with respect, but with a strange mix of envy and curiosity. They look at you and wonder, how can she be that confident? How can he live without asking permission from anyone? But they don't see the sleepless nights. The moments you've questioned whether you were wrong for being different. The wounds you've carried just because you wouldn't conform. They don't see it. So they judge. And you, just like always, you smile and keep walking. Here's my view. When you live truthfully, you don't just awaken the beautiful parts in others. You also reflect the parts they're not ready to face. And that's not your fault. The lesson here carries powerful social value. You can't control how others feel about you. But you can choose how you keep walking. Regardless of those feelings. In a world that increasingly rewards surface perfection over inner depth. You, a Sagittarius, are a bold reminder that truth still matters. That living a life in alignment with your soul isn't rebellion. It's a collective healing act. You are the spark, the fire starter. But you're also the one who bears the cost of light. And light, as you know, isn't always welcomed. Especially when it reveals what others wish to keep hidden. I once met a Sagittarius man in his 50s. He told me I used to think if I was kind, worked hard, people would love me. But the truth is, the more honest I was, the more I was misunderstood. Until one day I realized, I wasn't born to please everyone. I was born to fulfill my purpose. I've never forgotten the look in his eyes. It was the gaze of someone who no longer held resentment, no longer chased praise. Only clarity remained. I know who I am, and I don't need permission to keep being that. And you too, Sagittarius. You don't need permission either. If you're hearing these words and feel an unnamed recognition stirring in your soul, if you've ever been talked about, ever felt like the whole world misunderstood you, leave a sign. Not for me. For the universe. Type into the comments. I don't need to fit the world. I only need to be true to myself. That's not just a sentence. It's a sacred reminder. You are not alone. You see, here's the strange truth. People rarely criticize those who pose no threat. But you, with your light, your blunt honesty, your refusal to shrink, you become a mirror for what others haven't yet touched within themselves. And mirrors always make people uncomfortable. So the question is, are you willing to keep shining? Even knowing your light might make others retreat? Or will you dim yourself, just so no one feels triggered? I believe you already know the answer. Because you are not only here to live truthfully, you are also a symbol of evolution, of the ability to rise above old definitions, old labels, and outdated destinies to rewrite a new chapter for yourself. And when you do that, you don't just change your own life. You're unintentionally opening a space where others feel brave enough to change, too. Maybe you've never thought of it this way, but the simple act of living true to yourself is already deeply human. Because you're inspiring those who are still afraid, those still hiding, those who are being forced to live a life that doesn't belong to them. You are the one who sparks the fire, and the one who keeps it burning. But you don't have to do it alone. Remember this. No one has the right to define you but you. They may speculate. They may distort. They may try to silence you. But they cannot extinguish what God has planted in your heart. And when you stand firm in your truth, you don't just inspire. You instill faith. And faith, when lived out fully, is always what changes the world. But real faith is not just believing in the good. It's choosing to remain kind, even when the world doesn't yet understand you. And I know, you've stood like that more times than you can count, haven't you? You are not weak. You are brave. Brave not because you don't feel fear, but because you keep going. Even when you're gossiped about, misunderstood, forgotten. Please remember this. In every rumor, there is a hidden piece of truth that others aren't ready to name. And that truth lives in you. But it doesn't stop there. Because behind those rumors, someone specific has been watching you. A woman. Not a stranger, but someone closer than you think. She doesn't say it aloud, but her eyes, they've said everything. Not everyone who stays beside you is truly sincere. And not every smile sent your way comes from love. Some people draw close, not because they admire your light, but because they want to stand close enough to control it. They wear the mask of kindness, of encouragement, of warm hugs. But underneath it all is one thing: insecurity. And the most dangerous person isn't the one who hates you openly. It's the one who envies you in silence. The one who smiles when you succeed, but secretly breathes a sigh of relief every time you fall. That person could be a woman you once trusted, someone who appeared to support you, to uplift you. But inside, she's packed tight with comparison. I've seen that look many times in spiritual readings. It's the look of a soul who hasn't yet learned to love herself, and therefore doesn't know how to be genuine with others. A person whose very existence feels threatened by your success. She doesn't envy you because you have more. She envies you because you are something she's not yet brave enough to become. And you, like every true Sagittarius, generous, trusting, giving, forgiving. You didn't notice it right away. Because you lead with your heart. Because you believe that if you're sincere, others will be too. But life is never that simple. Not everyone has your heart. Here's my view. Jealousy is a form of pain. It's the cry of a person who hasn't learned how to live fully within themselves. But that doesn't mean you have to let them hurt you. You can understand them. Have compassion for them. But that doesn't mean you need to keep them close. The lesson here is clear. When you step into a new season, a more mature, more luminous phase, there will be people who no longer fit. Not because they're bad, but because they no longer match your frequency. And keeping them around isn't kindness. It's self-delay. I know that's hard. Especially when that person used to matter to you. When they were part of your story. But true light cannot continue to live in a space dimmed by gentle deception. You see, not all pain comes from harsh places. Some of the deepest wounds come from the people who once stood next to you at your celebrations, held your hand when you were hurting, and now silently wish you wouldn't go further than them. So what's the emotional takeaway here? It's awakening. A truth you can no longer ignore. Not every embrace is safe. And sometimes, you have to pull your hand away. Not because you stopped loving, but because you've started loving yourself enough to stop letting falsehood into your heart. If someone comes to mind right now, someone who always made you feel like something was off. A name you can't quite put your finger on, but their presence makes you uneasy. Don't dismiss that feeling. Don't blame yourself for doubting. Because intuition never lies. Sagittarius has a rare gift. You sense what isn't said. You see the nuances words can't touch. So if you've ever felt something just doesn't feel right, chances are you were right. Pause for a moment. And if you're ready, write this down. I give myself permission to trust my intuition. That statement isn't just a nod to your inner strength. It's the doorway to freedom. From relationships that now exist only out of habit. I know saying goodbye isn't easy. Especially when you're someone loyal. The one who holds memories. The one who always wants to preserve something beautiful that once was. But sometimes, you don't owe each other anything anymore. And the kindest thing you can do is to let that person leave your energy circle. In peace and forgiveness. You don't need to be angry. You don't need to fight. You just need to stand still. Anchored in truth. Because truth, in the end, will always protect you. And if you've been looking for a sign to let go, this is it. You've come further than you think. You've grown more than you know. And no one, absolutely no one has the right to pull you back into an old energy space. A space you once clung to out of blind loyalty. I want you to remember this. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. Forgiveness is looking directly at the wound and choosing not to let it rule you anymore. And you, a Sagittarius, it's time for you to step out of a bond that's become too small for your soul. We're not here to fight anyone. We're here to return to the truth. And when you stand on the side of truth, you are never alone. But do you know what the most beautiful thing is? When you release a connection that's no longer sincere, the universe will send you a new one. Purer, more genuine. Without guessing games. Without defense. And I feel something drawing closer to you. A wave of energy that is gentle, but strong. A new person. Or a connection being renewed completely. They're not coming with artificial light. They come with truth. We'll open that door in the next part. Sometimes, what exhausts us the most isn't the rumors. It's the constant effort to prove that we're not what people say. Every day, you brace yourself to be right, so you won't be misunderstood, judged, or misrepresented. But eventually, you realize, trying to undo every rumor in your life is like trying to gather every fallen leaf in a strong wind. Pointless, draining, and unnecessary. Because the truth is, you don't need to explain yourself. When the light within you already speaks loud enough. I used to think that when someone spread something false about me, I needed to set the record straight. But after decades of living, I've come to understand. Your true reputation isn't built through words. It's revealed in how you live. The ones who really see you won't need anyone else to explain. The ones who believe only what they hear were never meant to be on your journey to begin with. Do you see it, Sagittarius? That it's time to stop proving yourself. To stop trying to please the crowd. To stop rewriting a story that was never yours to begin with. I know. Sometimes you just want to be understood. Especially when you've always given your all. When you've always believed the best in others. When you've always loved with your whole heart. And when you're misunderstood. It cuts deep. Not because of the words, but because your sincerity feels devalued. So what's the emotional truth here? It's learning to stop using your honesty as an apology. It's learning to be silent. Not because you're powerless, but because you're saving your energy for what truly matters. And Sagittarius, I know that isn't easy. Because you're not cold-hearted. You live through your heart. You pour your soul into everything you do. And because of that, you've been hurt more deeply than most. And because of that, you're also growing more deeply than anyone realizes. Here's my personal belief. Every rumor about you, as painful as it may be, is actually confirmation that you're creating movement. Because no one gossips about those who don't matter. They only talk about souls who are breaking out of the mold. And you, a Sagittarius, you are stepping out of your own familiar zone. No longer letting the approval of others define your worth. No longer letting the outside noise drown out your inner voice. You're choosing freedom. Not just in action, but in mind, in faith, in soul. The deepest lesson here is this. When you stop to truly listen to yourself, you'll realize you no longer need to defend. You just need to continue. Continue living a life that is honest, brave, and kind. And let your consistency be the response. And if you've ever felt misunderstood, ever wanted to scream just to be seen, try writing this down today. I let the truth within me be the witness. Let that be the anchor. Let that be where you return every time the outside noise grows loud again. Because you don't need an argument to prove you're the light. You just need to keep shining. I want to tell you a small story. Once, I visited an old cemetery in a quiet town with a friend. We found a tombstone that read, "This person was spoken badly of all their life, but never once lost peace in their soul." I stood in front of that grave for a long time. Because I knew that person understood something most people never learn. Peace doesn't come from being understood. Peace comes from knowing who you are and living true to that. You see, sometimes the strongest response is simply walking forward, head held high. That's Sagittarius. You don't chase after anyone. You don't stay in places where truth doesn't live. And you don't need anyone to validate that you are the right version of yourself. Because you know, your path is not a highway. It's a sacred trail known only to you and God. And I believe that the one hearing these words is the one walking that very path. Tired, but right. Lonely, but real. Quiet, but deep. And if you're walking and no one understands, please keep walking. Because the brightest light often rises in the stillest places. Right now, I invite you to take one deep breath and write this down. I don't need to be fully understood. I just need to live true to my soul. A simple phrase, but an act of liberation. Of a soul that no longer needs permission to exist in its own way. And here's the beautiful thing. Once you accept that, the rumors dissolve on their own. Not because someone apologizes, but because you no longer allow them to define who you are. When you enter this phase, a new level of spiritual and personal awareness, you begin to realize that the most precious thing you have is not fame, not success, but peace. It's a restful sleep. It's an honest gaze. It's a heart that no longer performs. And you know something, Sagittarius? That very peace will be what quiets the mouths of those who once spoke against you. Not because you defeated them, but because you no longer play that game. You've stepped up, risen higher. And at that level, the old ways no longer reach you. But this is not the end. On this path of freedom and true growth, something is waiting for you. A connection. A person. A message. Not coming to challenge you, but to heal you. And in the next part, we'll open the door to that. A destined encounter with someone approaching, carrying truth, not performance. If you've made it through everything we've talked about, truth, light, wounds, and whispers, then I believe you're ready for what's next. And it's not a crisis, not a test, but a calling, a divine invitation to the heart that has matured through being misunderstood. I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Just a single breath. And try to remember what it felt like to meet someone you didn't have to guard yourself around. Someone who made you feel safe without needing to impress them. Someone who didn't fill the silence with noise, but still made you feel heard. Do you remember? If someone's face appears in your mind, or even just a sense of someone or something not yet clear, but it brings you peace, That could be the sign. Because when you've walked through storm after storm, the universe doesn't reward you with glitter. It offers you sincerity. A pure connection. Free of manipulation. A person who doesn't come to change you, or to love some ideal version of you, but simply to see you as you are. Here's my perspective. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay forever. But there will always be a few who arrive at the perfect time, carrying the exact frequency to awaken parts of you you thought you had lost. I've seen many people, especially those with Sagittarius energy, spend years searching for a fairy tale love, someone to rescue them. But after all that seeking, what they truly need is someone who doesn't make them feel like they need to be rescued at all. Someone who simply accepts them. The lesson here is, love doesn't have to arrive in lightning strikes, intense thrills, or poetic vows. Real love often arrives softly, like a breeze, like someone stepping into your life, without disrupting its rhythm. They're just there, and you don't have to strain to keep them. The deepest emotional point is when you realize, this time, you're not choosing from emptiness. You're not loving out of fear of being alone. You're loving because you're already whole. And because of that, you don't cling. Because love born from freedom always knows how to find its way back. If you feel something stirring in the space around you, a soft but deep vibration, a quiet but warm presence, write this down as your invitation to receive. I am ready to welcome a connection rooted in truth. Not everyone will understand why you say that, but the universe will. And maybe so will the one walking toward you right now. And you know what? It might not be a person. Sometimes, it's a goal. A project. A beginning. A mission. A new belief. Something is coming. Not to take your energy, but to restore what life once took. And then, you'll stand in that moment and realize, after all the rumors, the lies, the wounds, the letting go, what remains is you. More whole, more full, more quiet. But to welcome what is new, you must take one final step: forgiveness. Forgiving yourself, forgiving those who never knew how to love you properly, and forgiving the parts of yourself that once doubted your worth. We will touch on that, a journey of deep forgiveness and liberation, in the next part. Because sometimes, healing doesn't begin with being loved. It begins with no longer hating yourself. Some wounds cannot be healed with words. Some scars don't need another apology, but a single moment of true understanding. And sometimes, the person we most need to forgive is ourselves. Sagittarius, if part 5 was the moment you opened your heart to receive the blessings the universe had long held back from you, then this part is when you learn to fly with new wings. Not the old you anymore, but a gentler, wiser, more grounded version. You know, forgiveness has never been easy. It doesn't happen in an instant. It's a process, a string of quiet days where you have to soothe your own heart, whispering, "It's all in the past now." A series of still moments when you sit face to face with memories you thought you'd forgotten, but still sting when they return. I once thought forgiveness meant erasing, forgetting, but no, forgiveness, in truth, is staring directly into the pain and choosing not to let it control you anymore. It's touching the scar and no longer flinching. It's being able to tell the story without tears in your eyes. My personal belief is this: forgiveness is not a sign of weakness. It is the highest display of inner strength. Only when you've grown enough, deep enough, solid enough, can you say, I still remember, but I no longer resent. And for you, a Sagittarius who has lived and loved with your whole heart, forgiveness is not a gift you give to others. It is a gift you give to your own soul. It's a form of freedom. Freedom from the weight you carried. Freedom from the expectations others placed upon you. Freedom from the outdated version of yourself. The lesson here runs deep. You can't step into a new journey while dragging the baggage of the old one. And some of those burdens don't come from anyone else. They come from you, still blaming yourself for loving the wrong person, trusting at the wrong time, speaking too soon, or staying silent when you should have spoken up. You weren't wrong. You were learning, just like the rest of us. So tell yourself this: I forgive the old version of me, because she brought me here today. Maybe you hoped too much, endured too long, forgot who you were just to keep someone else around. But the miracle is, you're still here, whole, even after being broken, quiet, but never defeated. The real turning point isn't an event. It's an awakening, realizing you don't need anyone's apology to begin healing. You can choose to forgive and move forward right here, right now. If these words are touching something tender inside you, something you haven't dared face in a long time, pause for a moment. And write this down: I forgive. And I choose freedom. No one else needs to see it, but the universe will. And when you truly let go, something new will arrive. Not loud, but deep enough to change you forever. Now imagine this: one day, you look back on everyone who ever hurt you. But instead of anger, you feel gratitude. Because thanks to them, you learned to love yourself. You learned to draw boundaries. You learned not to need anyone else's approval to feel worthy. And that day is your true rebirth. This rebirth won't come with fireworks. It will come in silence. Like someone suddenly realizing they no longer need to run. That they've finally come home to themselves. And you know what's beautiful? When you forgive and release the past, you don't just heal yourself. You open a doorway for the ones who come after you. You make way for the next generation. For the younger ones who saw you suffer, who will now learn from you how to rise. Because true forgiveness always carries social power. It spreads. It inspires. It sets not just one person free, but an entire current of lives. And if you're ready to receive what's coming, then prepare for the most miraculous thing of all: a calling. A beginning. A reason that finally helps you understand why all the old pain had to happen. The next part will be an unveiling, a life no longer led by memory, but guided by light. And you, dear Sagittarius, are standing at the threshold. Have you ever felt this, like something is quietly calling your name? Not through a voice. Not through a specific event. But through a subtle wave that slips into your dreams, your intuition, your quiet moments of so-called daydreaming. That isn't your imagination. It's real. And you are being called. Not by people, but by a higher realm, the one your soul once promised to return to Earth for. To live truthfully. To love fully. To walk like a beam of light in places that once knew only darkness. I believe this. Once we've truly learned how to forgive, the next step isn't to chase after new goals. It's to return to the original invitation of our destiny. To return to that soul calling, the one we heard as children, before the noise of the world made us forget. And you, Sagittarius, you didn't come here just to survive. You weren't born to repeat cycles. You came to break them. To walk as a message. To become living proof that people can fall hard and still rise. With brighter eyes and a softer heart. Here's my belief. Every soul has a moment when the universe stops sending trials and starts sending signs. Repeating dreams. Unexpected encounters. Doors that open even when you haven't knocked. If you're in that phase, where something inside you feels like it's shifting but you can't yet name it, this is the sign. You're not lost. You're being redirected. Because once you've forgiven, you become new soil. And soil that no longer holds bitterness or fear, becomes ready for a greater purpose. The deepest lesson here, Sagittarius, is not to go searching for destiny, but to become quiet enough to hear it when it comes searching for you. I once met a 60-year-old Sagittarius woman. She told me, I used to think my purpose had to be something big, something that helped a lot of people. But in the end, I realized, simply being kind to myself every day changed my daughter more than any sermon ever could. You see? Being called doesn't always mean being given a stage. Sometimes, it's that moment in your living room, looking back at all you've endured, and whispering to yourself, I made it through. And right then, the universe says, now you're ready. Ready for a new chapter. One that doesn't begin with, I have to become, but with, I remember who I am. If your heart is stirring right now, if there's a lump in your throat, a wave of emotion you can't name, let it be felt. And if you're ready, write this down. I receive the calling of my soul. You don't have to understand it all. You only have to believe. Because everything sacred comes first through faith, and only later through experience. And then you'll see. Every rumor, every wound, every moment that made you feel lost, was only the beginning. The real story begins when you live as the person your soul promised to be. And in the next part, the final chapter of this journey, we'll look back together to see that happiness is real. Not because everything became perfect, but because you've walked far enough to no longer see your past as where it began, but as something you've risen beyond. And you will live again as light, without asking permission, without needing to explain. And you'll realize it was only just beginning. So here we are. We've walked this road together, from whispers and misunderstandings to quiet awakenings, from forgiving others to forgiving yourself, and finally, to that sacred moment when you know you've been called. You've been chosen. You didn't come here by accident. Sagittarius, you've endured more than they know. And you kept your heart intact, even when it broke. You didn't let the whispers snuff out your flame. And because of that, you are the light. You are living proof of a simple but powerful truth: real light doesn't have to shout. It only needs to show up. If this journey has touched you in any way, leave a comment that becomes a promise to yourself. I am the light I was once searching for. And if you know someone lost in the noise, buried under rumors, judgment, or silent suffering, send them this. Because maybe they've been waiting for a gentle reminder that they're not alone. Thank you for being here. For being brave enough to look back. And for not abandoning the journey home to yourself. Keep walking, gently. Because this time, you're not walking to prove anything. You're walking home. To the light that's been waiting for you all along. And never stopped believing you'd return.